My own sister watched her husband pin me against the wall, his hands crushing my throat until my vision blurred into darkness. As I gasped for air, my shoulder agonizingly dislocated. She didn't try to stop him. Instead, she coldly leaned in and hissed, "Just sign it. You should have signed the loan." They thought they could terrorize me into being their financial guarantor because they thought I was completely alone. What they completely forgot was the active emergency SOS tracking beacon on my military smartwatch, linked directly to the nearby base alert system. Follow my story until the end to see how their greed backfired spectacularly, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has reached. Just as my world went completely black, the front door splintered open and a booming voice roared, "Military police, stand down and put your hands behind your head." The dusty heat of Sacramento slammed into my face the moment I stepped off the military transport bus. I'm Amber, a 27-year-old active-duty Army lieutenant and combat medic. After a grueling 14-month deployment overseas, managing trauma in high-pressure environments, I was finally home on a hard-earned 3-week leave. My plan was simple: decompress, clear my head, and stay at my late parents' suburban home. I had willingly allowed my older sister Chloe and her husband Brad to live there rent-free while they supposedly got back on their feet. But the moment my rideshare pulled into the familiar circular driveway, my stomach dropped. Parked right in front of the garage was a gleaming, brand-new luxury sports car that easily cost more than my annual military salary. Walking up to the porch, the old wooden door had been replaced with an expensive, high-tech electronic smart lock system. Inside, the modest home I grew up in was unrecognizable. The cozy, worn furniture was gone, replaced by designer leather couches, massive flat-screen televisions, and high-end decor that screamed excessive wealth. Chloe and Brad ran down the hallway to greet me, throwing their arms around my neck with an intensity that felt entirely manufactured. As Brad poured me a drink, I noticed his hands were subtly trembling. Chloe kept darting her eyes toward him, silently tracking his every movement like a nervous private waiting for orders. They were acting like lottery winners, yet a suffocating, desperate tension hung heavily in the air. My combat instincts flashed a warning. Something was terribly wrong. Dinner that night was an incredibly lavish affair, featuring fine catering that felt entirely out of place for a casual family homecoming. We sat in the dining room, but the atmosphere was completely suffocating. Brad spent the entire meal aggressively bragging about his newfound success, loudly claiming he had cracked the code to high-yield commercial real estate investment. Every time I asked a specific, direct question about his business model, he would quickly laugh it off and pour more wine, avoiding the details. Chloe sat entirely silent next to him, mechanically picking at her food and staring down at the table. The moment the plates were cleared, the casual facade completely vanished. Brad's smile turned sharp and calculated as he reached down, pulled a thick contract from his briefcase, and slid it directly across the table toward me. "Amber, we need a small favor to expedite our next big expansion," he said, his voice dripping with a synthetic high-pressure sales pitch. "We just need you to sign as a co-borrower and financial guarantor for a $450,000 commercial loan." I opened the paperwork, my disciplined military instincts instantly kicking into high gear. As I reviewed the predatory legal terms, my blood ran cold. The contract was a total scam, designed to tie the debt directly to my high-tier military credit and my inherited share of our parents' estate. If they defaulted, I would be entirely ruined. I closed the paperwork, looked Brad dead in the eye, and firmly said, "No, I'm not signing this." The next morning, the heavy silence in the house was deafening. I woke up early, entirely uneasy, and decided it was time to pack my tactical bags and check into a nearby hotel. But the moment I reached the front door and grabbed the handle, it wouldn't budge. I entered my override code into the new high-tech electronic smart lock, but the keypad flashed a blinding red. The system had been completely modified, and every single deadbolt was engaged, locking me inside. Before I could turn around, Brad stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, blocking my path. The slick, charismatic businessman from the night before was completely gone. His clothes were disheveled, and his eyes were wild with a dangerous, erratic desperation. "You aren't leaving until you sign those papers, Amber," he growled, stepping closer. He confessed that his luxury lifestyle was a complete lie. He owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to ruthless private lenders, and my signature was his absolute last lifeline. Suddenly, Chloe walked into the foyer. I looked at my own sister, begging her to open the door, but her expression was stone cold. "Just do it, Amber," she yelled, her voice cracking with synthetic panic. "If you don't sign as our guarantor, they are going to take everything we have. You owe us this." I reached into my pocket to call for help, but Brad lunged forward, aggressively ripping my phone straight out of my hands and instantly cutting the home Wi-Fi network. I was completely cut off, trapped inside my own home. Realizing I was trapped, my combat medic training instantly took over, flooding my system with adrenaline. I didn't waste a single breath arguing with them. Instead, I bolted down the narrow hallway, aiming for the glass sliding doors that led to the back garden. But Brad was incredibly fast, fueled by absolute panic and rage. He cut off my escape route, throwing his heavy frame directly into me and forcefully slamming my body against the drywall. The impact sent a jarring shockwave through my spine. Before I could reorient myself or throw a defensive strike, Brad's large hands locked onto my collarbones and violently shoved me backward. I felt a sickening, agonizing pop as my right shoulder completely dislocated under the immense pressure. I gasped in sheer agony, but my cry was instantly cut short. Brad shifted his weight, driving his thick forearm directly across my throat, aggressively pinning me to the wall and crushing my windpipe. "Just sign it," Chloe hissed, stepping closer as she held out the pen and the crumpled loan contract. She watched my face turn crimson, completely unmoved by my desperate struggle for oxygen. "You brought this on yourself, Amber. Just sign the paper and this all ends right now." My vision began to blur, dark spots dancing at the edges of my consciousness. With my left hand pinned, I managed to subtly drop my wrist and press the secret side button combination on my military-issued tactical smartwatch. It successfully triggered a high-priority silent SOS duress signal, broadcasting my exact GPS coordinates straight to the base MP detachment. My strength gave out, and my world faded entirely into pitch black. The suffocating darkness didn't last long. A sudden violent crash shattered the silence, echoing through the house like a thunderclap. The heavy front door didn't just open, it completely splintered off its hinges, flying into the foyer under the immense force of a tactical breach. Heavy, synchronized tactical boots pounded against the hardwood floors, moving with absolute precision and speed. Because my smartwatch had broadcast a high-priority officer under threat duress matrix, the nearby base military police detachment had deployed an active emergency response team with maximum authority. They swarmed the hallway in seconds, weapons raised, their flashlights cutting through the dim house. "Military police! Stand down! Stand down!" A commanding voice roared, the sound bouncing off the walls. "Hands behind your head! You are assaulting a United States Army officer." Brad froze instantly, his face draining of all color as the laser sights of multiple rifles locked onto his chest. Within a fraction of a second, two heavily armed MPs stepped forward, forcefully ripped him away from me, and slammed his face directly into the floor. They pulled his arms behind his back, clicking the heavy steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists. Chloe let out a piercing, panicked shriek, dropping the pen and the crumpled loan paperwork as she burst into hysterical tears, backing into the kitchen counter with her hands raised. I slumped against the wall, gasping violently for air, my throat burning with every desperate breath. The unit's tactical medic immediately knelt beside me, his calm voice cutting through my panic as he began checking my vitals and assessing the severe bruising on my neck. "Lieutenant, we've got you," he whispered, carefully supporting my arm. With a swift, practiced motion, he expertly popped my dislocated shoulder back into place, a sharp jolt of pain giving way to instant, overwhelming relief. The flashing red and blue emergency lights completely illuminated the suburban neighborhood as the local police arrived to assist the military police. The living room was turned into an active crime scene, and the thick loan contract Brad had tried to force upon me was logged as primary evidence. Because the physical assault and attempted extortion were committed against an active-duty military officer, federal investigators immediately took charge of the case, alongside local detectives. It didn't take long for the house of cards Brad and Chloe had built to completely collapse under the weight of a thorough federal investigation. Searching the house and accessing Brad's electronic devices uncovered a massive, systematic trail of criminal activity. Investigators discovered that the luxury sports car and high-end renovations had been funded entirely through identity theft, wire fraud, and the forgery of several military loan forms. Brad had been opening lines of credit under my name while I was deployed overseas, using my clean record to fuel his reckless spending. Because his crimes involved the targeted exploitation of active-duty military benefits, federal prosecutors stepped in, ensuring that neither of them would be granted bail. The immediate aftermath of their arrest was a pathetic display of cowardice. The moment they were brought into the police interrogation rooms, their united front vanished. Chloe broke down completely, weeping as she turned on her husband, claiming she was entirely brainwashed and pointing to Brad as the mastermind behind the fraud. Brad, facing severe federal charges with zero chance of escape, retaliated by giving detectives detailed logs of Chloe's active participation in the extortion plot. They had shown absolutely no mercy to me, but now they were eagerly destroying each other to save themselves. 3 months later, the physical wounds had fully healed, leaving me stronger and more focused than ever. I returned to active duty with my head held high, completely free of the toxic parasites who tried to destroy me. Using the legal power of my parents' estate, I permanently evicted my sister, sold the suburban house, and securely invested the profits into my own long-term future. The hammer of justice struck Brad and Chloe with absolute devastating precision. Brad pled guilty to federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and assault on a military officer, receiving a harsh sentence of 8 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Chloe's frantic attempts to play the victim utterly failed. She was sentenced to 5 years of intense probation as an active accessory, stripped of all assets, and forced into absolute financial ruin. They wanted to steal my freedom, but instead, they completely locked away their own. Now, I am incredibly curious about all of you who have listened to my story until the very end. What would you have done if your own blood turned on you with such ruthless greed? Would you have shown them any mercy? Please comment your thoughts and reactions below. And meanwhile, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other incredible, dramatic stories that are absolute channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you with their twists. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you in the next story.